So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the general membership meeting. My name is Sarah Castro, and I'm the president. Today, I'd like to recognize that we are celebrating our centennial this year, so we are 100 years old this year. In fitting with our theme, we are lucky to have Judge Smith here to present Lawyers and Legends of Sarasota County. So we will get to hear a little about the history of our legal profession in this county over the past 100 years. So that will be a very interesting presentation, and I look forward to that. I would like to recognize a few important groups today. I would like to recognize the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, which is our exclusive community partner, and they've provided nearly 2 decades of continual support for our organization. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize our business partners, Mallard Perez, Cogent Bank, Bank OZK, South State Bank, Veritex Legal Solutions, Kona Realty, and St. Stephen's Episcopal School. Our law firm partners are Hale Law, Bentley Goodrich Keeson, Loftus Law, the John Chapman Law Firm, Icard Merrill, and Williams Parker. I would like to recognize our judges in attendance: Judge Hunter Carroll, Judge Rochelle Curley, Judge Ryan Felix, Judge Dana Moss, Judge Gilbert Smith, and Judge Charles Williams. And then finally, I'd like to recognize our past presidents. So Judge Hunter Carroll again, Doug Cherry, Drew Clayton, Chip Gaylor, Jean George, Dana Keene, Amanda Keeson, Robert Shebb, Scott Westheimer, and Neil Lyons. So let's give a round of applause for everyone, please. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Judge Hunter Carroll to the stage for a special presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. For many years, our circuit had a professionalism award for criminal attorneys, but we did not have one for civil attorneys. Approximately 3 years ago, our circuit created a professionalism award that would be awarded by the judges to an attorney in town, or actually in our circuit, I should say, relating to professionalism in the field of civil law. And it was named after Lamar Matthews, who many of us in this room knew as the consummate professional person who could always keep that person's word. And so I am here on behalf of the Chief Judge today, who has court right now, to present this year's the 3rd recipient, and the last 2 recipients. Kim Bald was the 2024 recipient, and the 2023 was Keith DeBose. Now, the individual awarding or being awarded this 2025 Professionalism Award from the court, the Lamar Matthews Award, is somebody known to all of us. And I think you would all agree that this person not only is a tremendous professional, but as a person has done so much for our community, so much for that person's firm, and so much for us individually. So without further ado, Mr. Westheimer. On behalf of the court and the Chief Judge, thank you so very much, and thank you for the professionalism that you always show for years and years and years. And thank you for being here. And here's the box. If you would like to say a few words.
Sure. I don't know if everyone wants me to say a few words, but I guess I'll say something. So first I'll say normally I'm introduced by Judge David Dankin or Keith DeBose, which is more like a roast. So Judge Carroll, thank you. That was the best introduction I've had in like 7 years in Sarasota County. So I feel incredible. Having practiced with Lamar Matthews, knowing his legacy and everything we have here, thank you. It's more than an honor. When you travel the state and you leave this town, you don't realize what you have here till you leave. I can't say that there's a better group of judges, a better group of attorneys, a more professional bar association than here. So it's been an honor growing up here as a lawyer. It's been an honor being a professional here. And all I try to do is emulate those before me. And we have so many, I won't name them all, in the audience today that are people I've modeled myself after. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Judge Carroll. Thank you, the court. This is a true honor. And Lamar Matthews is a real professional. So thank you very much. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's program, the Honorable Gilbert Smith, Jr. A circuit court judge at the 12th Judicial Circuit since he was elected in 2008. Judge Smith has taken on the role of being our resident legal historian and documentarian. Our local bar and our local judiciary has a long, interesting history with many colorful characters and events that would be suitable for a Hollywood movie or perhaps a TV sitcom. No one is better at presenting this history and telling these stories than our own Judge Smith. Judge Smith has always been involved in the community and believes community service is important to succeed in any career. He is an Eagle Scout and has been always active in Boy Scouts of America, particularly in Manatee County. He was president of the Manatee County Bar Association from 2002 until 2003 and was the president of the Bradenton Kiwanis from 2021 through 2022. While serving as the president of the Manatee County Bar Association, Judge Smith became interested in preserving the history of local lawyers and judges. He published Lawyers and Legends of Manatee County, a history of the lawyers in Manatee County from 1855 until 2012. And he followed that up with a second edition, which continued the story through 2024. This year, Judge Smith is publishing Legends of the Bench, Part 1, the history of the judges of the 12th Judicial Circuit from 1855 through 1979, to be followed by Part 2, which will cover judges up until the present day. This is a copy of the Lawyers and Legends of Manatee County, the history of Lawyers and Legends of Manatee County from 1855 to 2024. In the old Manatee County Courthouse, there was this painting that was done by a local lawyer, and in it are depicted many of the lawyers from that early part of our legal system in the 1900s and late 1950s and then the 1960s. Judge Smith believes that preserving local history in writing is important to honor those people who worked, sacrificed, and volunteered to shape our legal community. So members and friends of the bar, I present to you Judge Gilbert Smith, Jr.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. I've got to thank METV and Chris Dolan, who are here, who helped me a lot of the time with a lot of the programs I put on, and I appreciate them being here. First thing I want to do is congratulate all of you and congratulate this Bar Association on 100 years of being here in Sarasota County. And it's the same year that America is celebrating its 250-year anniversary, and I think that's really a special time that you'll always remember. Now, I haven't talked to this Bar Association for 18 years, and that's when I was running for office, and so that was a long time ago, and I appreciate you inviting me to be here. So I've got a lot of things to talk about, and we're going to get started in just a minute. But I do want to mention a few things, and that is that finding photos of some people in history is difficult. So I'm always looking for photos of people. And when I talk about finding photos, I'm talking about people from the 1800s and the early 1900s at times, that it's difficult, sometimes impossible. As Judge Williams said, when I wrote Lawyers and Legends of Manatee County, after that, intended to start writing a book on the Lawyers and Legends of Sarasota County. I got a little distracted, work got in the way, and I have not but recently picked that up again. But today I'm going to share with you some of the research that I've done, and I'm so glad that Judge Carroll mentioned Lamar Matthews' name, because Martin Garcia asked me if I was going to mention Lamar, and I was not, but now his name's been mentioned 2 or 3 times by Judge Carroll and Scott.
We have his mini-me here.
And so I like this crowd we have here today, because this can be a discussion if you want it to be. I will begin in just a few minutes with the slides, but I do want to just mention this Bar Association, as all of you know, and ones that have been members of this Bar Association for a long time, realize that it has a rich, rich history, and it's full of very interesting and colorful people, as Judge Williams mentioned. And unless we start writing that history down, much of it will be lost. Now, there's some stories that you really can't write down, that you'd like to write down, and I'm actually saving those stories for either after I die or the statute of limitations has expired. And I'm going to call that book, After Dark, Lawyers and Legends. Growing up here, I heard many stories about lawyers in Sarasota County, because my dad practiced here and served as a judge for a period of time. So I'm familiar with a lot of the history down here. Now, when Manatee County was created in 1855, it was a 5,000 square mile county, and with a border north of Ruskin, the Sun City area, and went south all the way to the Charlotte Harbor. The Gulf of Mexico bordered on the west, and the Kissimmee River area bordered the east. It was quite a big county, and if you look at the state of Florida, you can see how large it was in terms of where the state is, in terms of the counties at that time. And after a justice system was established in Manatee County in 1855, a probate judge and justice of the peace were appointed as local residents. Ezekiel Glazier was appointed as a probate judge, and James Green, Josiah Gates, and Nathaniel Hunter were appointed as justice of the peace. And these men, the only training in law they had was life experiences. None of them were trained in the law. And in fact, Ezekiel Glazier was a carpenter, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. But he was a carpenter and also a minister. James Green, who was actually in the middle, his claim to fame was being the sheriff of Hillsborough County and being a well-known, what we would call, maybe not politically correct, an Indian fighter, Seminole Indian fighter. In fact, that's where he got his training. And the circuit judge was Judge Thomas King, a resident of Tampa, and that's one of the photos I do not have. That's one of the photos I'm continuing to look for, but of course he served in 1855, and I don't believe there may not be a photo of him. The first county seat in the village of Manatee on the Manatee River is in the Manatee Historical Park in Bradenton, and this was the first courthouse in Manatee County, and one of the only courthouses, the original ones that still stands in the state of Florida. This was restored, and Judge Williams and others here have conducted proceedings there. They have filmed there, and it really stands as our history. And that courthouse was built and completed by Ezekiel Glazier, who was the probate judge. He built it, and completed in 1860, just in time for the Civil War to start, and where then judicial proceedings stopped. So it didn't get used much except by the local probate judge and the justice of the peace, but a circuit judge quit coming to Manatee County because the blockade, the naval blockade around Tampa Bay. And after the Civil War, and I'm going to speed this up to after the Civil War, the county seat was moved in 1867 to a new town in central Manatee County at that time called Pine Level. And this is a map that shows Pine Level, which now, just to let you know where that is, if you drive directly east from here, it's going to be just a few miles west of Arcadia. And it's across a small river called Horse Creek that my dad used to swim in and hunt for frogs when he was a young man. Now, for close to 20 years, the town of Pine Level was a log cabin courthouse, and there wasn't much else on the courthouse except for this building. And so there was a jail that was built, and there wasn't much of a jail, but it was built there, and that's what they used back then to hold court. And this, remember, Manatee County, anybody that wanted to vote, anybody that wanted to register a deed, anybody that needed to go to court had to travel all the way across to Central Florida into Pine Level to have this. James Geddes was the first circuit judge to preside in Manatee County after the Civil War, and he was out of Tampa, and he was the first judge to hold court in Pine Level. Interesting judge that was in the Confederate Army, and he had the difficult task of hearing cases, reparation cases, filed by families against the Confederate Army, which he served in, who had burned their homes down. The next judge is Judge Enoch Mizell, who was a county judge in Manatee County, and you probably thought it was difficult, appeared in front of Judge Deacon. He was a tough judge, and he was related to the most famous cowboy in Florida's history, and that's Bone Mizell, which is the next photo is going to be him a little older. He's got the beard on the right-hand side. That's Bone in the middle, and his name is actually Bonaparte. And his father's on the left-hand side, and that's Morgan. As I stated, the courthouse, the jail, and a few other buildings made up the town of Pine Level that was the only thing there. And there are not any photographs because if you go to Pine Level, the only thing there now is a Methodist church, pastures and then farms there. The entire town disappeared. For many years, it was a ghost town, and but the town did disappear eventually and was taken over by local farmers. There were a lot the town in the 1800s really did become a town with a lot of buildings, a lot of businesses, but they had a lot of saloons, and the saloons outnumbered the businesses 10 to 1. And so there was a lot of business for the courts at that time. Not too many lawyers, but a lot of courts. Judge Henry Lawrence Mitchell was a circuit judge, was appointed, and he became the most famous judge from Manatee County because after he served as circuit judge here, he also then went on to the Florida Supreme Court, and then after that became the governor of Florida in 1893. And he was serving in Pine Level when the famous Sarasota assassins case was held, which made the New York Times, made many newspapers throughout the United States. And Jan Matthews writes about the trial in her book, The Edge of Wilderness, which you should read if you have an opportunity. Now, the justice of the peace were interesting people, and I write about a lot of it in my next book, but they were interesting for a lot of different reasons. And the interesting justice of the peace, Alden Adams, was the justice of the peace that issued the warrants, but he not only issued the warrants, he also put on a gun and joined the posse and went after the suspects. And this is a picture of Justice of the Peace Adams. Now, he was interesting because he had a lot of wealth, and he had made a lot of money up north owning different businesses. He was also a journalist who turned down the opportunity to go look for Dr. Livingston, and instead he sent a colleague of him to do that, so he missed that opportunity. But he built on the Manatee River this estate. It had 800 acres, and that was built, and that was a castle that he built. And there were quite a few justices of the peace that actually had these. And so when he issued the warrants, he had the law enforcement come to his castle, and that's where he was. The next is the hanging tree at Pine Level, and there really was a hanging tree there. And it was one where there were no legal hangings, but it was used a lot. Another justice of the peace was Ziba King, and he was a businessman who was a cattleman and became one of the biggest cattlemen in Central Florida at that time. But he was also a state representative, and he happened to be the state representative of that at that time when the county was divided and DeSoto County was created. And you'll see here that what happened is that Pine Level went with DeSoto County, so all of a sudden Manatee County lost its county seat, which was a very interesting time for that to happen. And so now we'll go to Bradenton, where there was, Bradenton was established now, and eventually it did win the vote over Sarasota, Palmetto, Nokomis to become the county seat of Manatee County, and over Sarasota, because Sarasota County was continuing to be in the county. And at the courthouse that was eventually used was Judge Graham's wife, who's Adeline Graham, had a hotel, and it became the courthouse for many, many years. And so here's the number of the judges. This is the courthouse here, and there's a number of the judges who served at that time: Judge Wall, Judge Hanson, Judge Stewart in the middle, and Judge Curry and Judge Sparkman in the upper right-hand corner. They were the judges that served in that era. Now, everybody here should know who John Gillespie is, and John Gillespie is going to be somebody that's going to be in your history, because John Gillespie actually is the first lawyer to actually have practiced here in Sarasota County, even though you can look on AI and a number of other sources, and they're going to have some other people. But John Gillespie actually was trained as a lawyer in Scotland and became an attorney there. And when he came over to Sarasota County, or Sarasota at the time, in 1886, to sort of rescue the Scottish colony that had arrived here, that he had with him this background in law. And the courthouse that was there at this time was here, and that's on the front of my first book, Lawyers and Legends of Manatee County, and that's the main street of Manatee Avenue and Main Street in Bradenton, and that's the courthouse that was there at that time, a wooden courthouse. And John Gillespie appeared in front of Judge Phillips, who was in a previous photo, and I'm showing him again, and Judge Phillips is the one that swore him in, and that was in 1896. And at that time, you got admitted to practice law by appearing in front of a circuit judge. And Judge Phillips announced that he's a man of good moral character that has been admitted to practice of the law in the courts of Scotland and the Kingdom of Great Britain, and he possesses the requisite qualifications to practice law here. And so John appeared in many of the courts, and he actually was an attorney in the city of Sarasota, the town of Sarasota, and become, as all of you must know, or would know, he turns out to be the first mayor of Sarasota before Sarasota County is incorporated, but he was the mayor. In 1912, and I'm going to go now into the Sarasota County lawyers who were first. In 1912, John Burkett, Sr., began practicing law in 1912 on Main Street in Sarasota. And what brought him down to Sarasota was he had investment in the Bellhaven Inn. And he became very successful at a number of different businesses, including practicing law. And he also was on the committee and very involved in Sarasota County becoming its own county in 1921. Now, the courthouse next in Manatee County went up in 1913, and this was the county where, at that time, a number of different judges would have appeared, and the first one I want to talk about is O.K. Reeves. Now, O.K., that was his name, O.K. Reeves. That's what he went by. And he was actually a Sarasota person, raised in Fruitville. But he practiced law in Bradenton and became a circuit judge in 1915, and he served for quite a long period of time. And he actually tried a trial, probably the last murder trial in Manatee County that resulted in the death penalty, which at that time they hung the accused on the roof of the Manatee County Courthouse. And that's going to be in my next book, more about that, but it's also in Lawyers and Legends. The next is a business card I put down here of Carey Fish, because he was another lawyer that started in 1921. And I'm going to have a picture of him, not a good picture, but we're going to have a good picture of him next, of Judge Carey as a lawyer. And then he became a judge in Bradenton, Manatee County, but at that time Sarasota County wasn't established yet. Next, there's an article I have that and this is another photo I'm looking for. In 1916, William H. Perry moved to Sarasota and began practicing law. And there was another Perry who also became a judge and a lawyer here, but Judge Perry at that time was an experienced 46-year-old attorney who came out of Chicago to practice law here with and his brother will come later. The next lawyer is Frank Redd, who became in 1917, he became Sarasota, and he, for many, many years, he was involved and actually becomes a president of this bar association later on. Next is a man named Thomas Everton in 1915, who became an attorney here. And again, I'm looking for photos of him. 1921 was a big year for Sarasota because Sarasota County was established, and at that time, and the newspapers, they read that, hooray for Sarasota, and another one had the vote ratifying because the legislature created Sarasota, but they conditioned it on ratification by the voters here, and they did ratify it, and then Sarasota, the city, was selected to be the county seat. Now, for some period of time, I've been looking for a photo of what the courthouse looked like, because the courthouse, they didn't have a courthouse, so it turned out to be the arcade, the Hoover Arcade, which was at the end of Main Street on the Sarasota Bay. And so I finally found an article in the Tampa Tribune in 1921 that had a photograph that showed that in fact it was the courthouse. And I'll keep going, even though we may have a little technical issue here. That was this is an article showing who the first appointed officials were of Sarasota County. And it turns out that, we'll look back, and it turns out that William Perry, who I referred to earlier, was the first Sarasota County judge. And Frank Redd was the first prosecuting attorney. And so then, as we moved towards this, 1921 was such a big year that something else happened that changed the course of Sarasota County, and that was the hurricane in 1921. And so there's, without the hurricane in 1921, I'm not sure where Sarasota would go, but Sarasota County turns into, rather than a fishing town, into a resort town, and it changed a lot. And Jeff LaHerd talks about this in the new book that he has written, which was quite significant, that it was all the damage that was done to Sarasota County. But, to Sarasota County, which was just recently the county. So it was really important history in their time for that to happen, because it changed the course of how Sarasota County proceeded. The next article with a picture I have is Paul Albritton, who started in 1922 practicing law here in Sarasota County. And I wouldn't even know much about Judge Albritton without having lunch with Judge Boylston many, many years ago, who mentioned, he grew up in Sarasota, and mentioned why we didn't have Judge Albritton in our history of judges here, Well, I looked into it, so I've included him in the new book that I'm writing because he was here, but he only served as circuit judge when Sarasota County had its own circuit at one time. It was the 27th Judicial Circuit. So he was an All-Briton from this area, from Wauchula, I believe, and his family's been around here a long time, and he served for a long time. He also becomes a defense lawyer after the 27th Judicial Circuit is eliminated by the legislature, and he goes on to defend a judge accused of attempted murder in the 1940s, and you're going to have to read about that in my next book. The next photo is Arthur Clark, who is also one of the first people who was practicing law here in 1922. He becomes a judge later, and when he's appointed to the bench, I think he was the third lawyer to serve as a Sarasota County judge. The next is Sidney Perry, and there were several Perrys that were here, and he started practicing law in 1924. And at that period of time, there were a number of different lawyers who came down who were very experienced, successful lawyers in Chicago and New York, and they were coming down because of the climate, because now Sarasota had turned into more of a resort town, and business was good, and he moved down, and he was a lawyer here for many years. The next is J. V. Keene. He practiced Sarasota in 1923, and he established a firm of Surrency and Keene and became very successful here, and he served in the legislature also. So in 1924, Wendell Forrest Chapman was appointed. He started practicing law here, and he became the judge in 1944. But he made the news when he is the judge that chased someone at 5 Points during the middle of the day shopping and fired a weapon, shots at another person, and was arrested for attempted murder. And at that time, retired Judge Paul Albritton defended him, and I'm going to let you read about that in my next book, or when I talk to you again, how that turned out but he doesn't look very happy there. But that's actually a photo of him in 1953 as a member of this bar association in a pictorial that you all have. The next is John Early, and John Early, a lot of you may know who John Early is. In 1924, he established the firm of Early and Early here with his brother, and he practiced here for a long time. Now, his claim to fame, he became a legislator, he became a judge, and he became the United States' oldest Eagle Scout when he was still alive and 104 years old. The next is Labar Dozier, who some of you may have heard about. He practiced law and started practicing law in 1932, but I included here because he actually, in 1924, he was a legal stenographer for Paul Albritton and Clark and Arthur Clark in their practice, and he was a court reporter, and he took the bar exam without going to school and passed. And so he started practicing law in 1932. The next is H.V. Philpott. He was a prosecuting attorney here, and he began in 1924, and he died tragically in an accident in 1936, so you wouldn't have known him. Henry Williford is another lawyer who started in 1925. And he served as a state attorney for Sarasota County for many, many years. Next is Harrison Behringer, who started in 1924, and he eventually was elected state senator. But then he was killed in a plane crash in Lakeland while he was still serving as senator, and so in 1945. And finally, no, it's not finally, but almost finally, J.J. Williams, Jr., who a lot of you know about. And he started practicing in 1925, and he came down. He was another one of these older attorneys. I say older at the time. I'm not old as me, but he was 38 years old. But he was a very experienced attorney, but he came down from Memphis with a lot of experience and became very successful. And he went into business with Sidney Perry and Williford, who you've just heard about. And of course, they created the firm Perry, Williams, and Williford. And then later, he evolved to a firm of Williams Parker. Now, when you talk about the darts here, you have to, and you start talking about Judge Dart, you have to talk about two Judge Darts. This is a photo of Francis Dart, who started practicing law in Sarasota with John Burkle, who was the first attorney, I said, that was practicing here after John Gillespie. And he was elected Sarasota County Judge and served till 1938. But the reason I said that you have to talk about the darts in terms of judges, because his father was a judge who actually retired here as a judge, but he was always called judge. And so Judge Dart, who I think I have an article on, practiced with a number of people. He practiced law with John Burkle, he practiced with John J. Williams and Arthur Bell, and died in 1937. So in 1927, the Sarasota County courthouse was completed, and of course it served the judiciary for many, many years before there were any other buildings built for that. I do want to mention the next person, and that is Bessie Sims. And this is someone for years and years that I didn't know about. And Bessie Sims turns out to be one of the first women to be practiced law in Manatee and then in Sarasota County. She worked for the Grimes firm in Manatee County and did not go to law school, but she worked at the firm for so long that she decided to take the bar exam and studied hard, and she passed. And so the legislature had to pass a special act for her to be able to take the bar exam. And she, in 1930, she started practicing in Sarasota County, and she married, let's see, Charles Williams was his name, not the Charles Williams who introduced me, but another Charles Williams. And what's interesting is that Charles Williams started a law school in Sarasota in 1927. And for many years, there was a law school here, believe it or not. Now, I'm going to sort of speed up to the last frame I have here, since I know we're sort of at the end. And so, in closing, I want to say this before I talk about what's on the screen. This will be the last time I talk to you as a judge. I retired July 31st, 2026, because the Constitution says I have to in Florida, because I turned 75 in August. And you know this, but I just want to tell you that we have such a great bar here in Sarasota County. We have such a great bench here in Sarasota. The bench in the 12th Judicial Circuit is just a great bench with a lot of judges who are very conscientious judges. From the 18 years that I've been here, this is probably one of the better benches that I've been in. Not to say that they've all been great, but this has been one of the ones. So I am not in a hurry to retire, because I actually cherish the time because of the bar, and the bar is so good, the bench is so good, and I really have enjoyed it. So many, many years ago, as Judge Williams indicated, I started getting interested in preserving history because we're losing it so fast. And when I was at Manatee County Bar Association, the history was in cardboard boxes, untouched for many years. It was disorganized and so forth. So I tried to organize it, and I've written books to preserve that. And that's basically, why I do that, other than because I do believe that, all of these things we do every day, you would do every day. For so many people, we need to preserve that history if for our children, for future generations, because what we do as lawyers and judges is so important and changes people's lives. So this slide here is a draft of the front cover of my next book before it's gone to the designer, so it may not look anything like this. But this is my proposed book that I hope is going to be out soon, and it's going to preserve the history of those very colorful judges. And I'm telling you, those of you that appeared in front of Judge Talley, there are judges that outdo him in terms of colorfulness, if that's a word. So up in the right-hand corner, a lot of you that are here may recognize that's my dad. And so it's personal to me writing about this because when my dad was appointed in 1971, I really felt like I became part of the circuit. And I'll tell you why. There were only 7 circuit judges, and there were a couple of county judges in each county. And the judges that my dad served with oftentimes became my parents. And what has happened through history, which I know all of you know, is we become more isolated from one another, from the judges to the lawyers. And I like everything this Bar Association is doing and what the judges are doing to try to build a mentorship at times, to build that camaraderie that you have, because it's really important. It's really important. And I think it helps all of us in your practice of law, but it sure helps the judges also in what they do every day. So I may or may not be back to speak to you, but I won't be as a judge. But if I do get to come back to speak to you, I will look forward to it to share some more history with you. So thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Judge Smith. That was very interesting. I can't imagine the amount of work and research that you've put into your new book, and we all look forward to it. I'm sure it has some great stories in there. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Please check your emails and look for our Bench Bar Conference that's coming up. It will be at the St. Regis on Longboat Key. We have some excellent speakers, some really interesting programming, and a beautiful venue, so I hope to see you there. And thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.